Burning fat and building muscle may seem like a very simple process, but we don't understand that this is our body's way of addressing stress so that it's readier for the next time it experiences that same stressor. You have an idle on your setting. Your car runs at a particular base RPM. That's your metabolism. The higher your metabolism, the more that you're burning those energy reserves all day long. The problem with that is if the idle's too high, eventually the strain on the engine, the heat, will cause the engine to seize. You'll burn out. We need to make sure that when we're addressing how do I increase my metabolism, we're also addressing the fact that how do I shut everything down? And I bring this up because stress is stress is stress. So if you have a high stress job, you have a high stress domestic life, like having children that don't allow you to sleep through the night, and you have a high stress recreational activity, let's say you like to climb or mountain bike ride or grapple and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, stress is stress is stress. If you add exercise intensity on top of that stress, then the body will assume evolutionarily that you're in danger. It's going to protect itself by converting your muscle into blood sugar and even your bone and storing very stubborn white fat cells for long-term cold storage and to wrap your viscera, your organs, in protective sheaths in case you get lacerated by a saber-toothed tiger. Just because you are exercising more intensely does not mean you're going to burn fat. If you go too intensely, too frequently, or too suddenly, you're going to gain fat and lose muscle, contrary to what we think. Often, we will initially start to build better muscle by doing recovery type exercises like a yoga class or a stretch class or a Tai Chi class, things that involve very little intensity. How did we burn fat and build muscle by starting with a recovery activity? Because you're lowering the idle, you're lowering the stress on the engine, so suddenly the baseline is established again. That doesn't work forever. You will eventually start to cannibalize muscle and bone from doing only yoga over time, as it's intended, as a health modality for meditation. Same thing with Tai Chi, same thing with stretch. Eventually the chassis needs intensity, but if you put on intensity too fast and do not allow positive adaptation, then what happens? You adapt to poor posture, you adapt to poor technique. The body doesn't like poor technique because it's painful. So the nervous system, instead of keeping that muscle tension and developing stronger muscle, it shuts off the muscle tension and wraps that pattern of poor technique and poor posture in thick tissue called fascia. So you actually lose muscle tone and you become very leathery. With that, when you try to exercise then, the internal experience, the internal tension of your nervous system will cause, without being too technical, stress to be released throughout your body, a cortisol response to any exercise, so that when you go to exercise and you've adapted to poor posture, then over time, suddenly you start losing muscle and losing bone and building white fat cells. So initially, something like a massage or physical therapy or body work or any one of the basic somatic modalities will allow you to restore postural ease, release internal chains of tension so that when you do exercise even lightly, you start building muscle and burning fat. Inherently in that process then, you should have some type of wave so that when you do have intensity, you know how to back off from the intensity that you just performed and get 100% adaptation out of the structural change in your body so that you burn fat and build muscle for your entire life. Now there's a myth. There's a myth that as you get older, that changes and that you start to store fat and you start to eat muscle. We're challenging that myth in the way we're living our lives right now. The reason that that myth exists is we are aging but we don't need to get older. As we age, there's a lot more history in this body. It's not like a young piece of veal that is puffy and without innervation. It's stringy and gamey. So anything that we do is going to fire an old pattern of tension. And if the posture's changed, there's going to be more baseline pain. And if there are restrictions in the body and I apply, because I have stress in my job, stress in my life, stress in my activities. As I apply more stress and exercise, then I start to cannibalize muscle and bone faster and build white fat cells faster. What if I didn't do that? Then as I get older, I should see myself getting better over time because I am applying skills of recovery more tactically. I know that's enough stress for me today. I can be humbler as I get older and have an indefinite amount of progress. This life's gonna end. However, our retirement plan should be how little fat that we've stored and how much muscle that we've stored that can be functionally applied to activities. As we get older, let's challenge that belief by applying it right now. So if you're a young person and you're coming into exercise, you have the gift of virility for 10 or 20 years, where you can act with complete mindlessness and stupidity and get away with it. But you're gonna pay the bill. That's gonna come. If you dare to train this way now, this next generation that you're stepping into, what you'll find is you're gonna be better longer. You're gonna be able to do more and more of it. And perhaps you will be the generation that pushes the concept of old another 10 years. Whereas the generation right now, we're working on moving another decade farther away by tactically building muscle and burning fat.